In my last video, I talked about cross-platforming and how I'd like to see more gaming communities having the ability to come together and play games, no matter the platform they play on. However, there was a big issue that a lot of you guys kept commenting about, and that was the limitations of consoles. One of the biggest issues is that console versions of games are left with less content, and that could be pertinent to a mission that you're playing. Now this video is not a rebuttal to those comments, but with comments like these I feel a big question arises. What is the future of consoles? Where are they going? And how could they be able to attain better visuals, higher frame rate, and the ability to cross-platform without losing something? Well, recently, streaming has become a very big thing. Nvidia has dedicated a lot of its time to developing not only game streaming software, but actual products like the Nvidia Shield series, that you can stream games from your PC to your TV. But here's the kicker. For a few bucks a month, you can stream games that you do not own to your TV from their servers at 1080p 60 FPS or even 4K 60 FPS if you like. Now think of this. The next generation of consoles that come out are like this. I feel this is one of the few ways that Sony and Microsoft can actually compete. They would have a big server room which would stream the games to you. All you have to do is purchase their streaming device and pay their monthly or yearly fee, as usual. And you can play any game you want, with visuals and frame rates that actually compete with PCs. Now there are quite a few downfalls to this, but there are also a lot of pros. I will start with the pros. Firstly, as I said a second ago, they could play games at 1080p or 4K at 60 FPS. They can stream any game they want with or without actually purchasing the game. To be honest, I feel like Microsoft and Sony would probably still make you buy the game and then stream it, but that's just me. Thirdly, you wouldn't technically have a console anymore. It would be a really small streaming box that would take up less space, less power, but it would be way more powerful, which would be cool. And also, the idea of backwards compatibility could also be a potential. However, the cons are really bad. A lot of people don't like the idea of not being able to have a physical collection, and streaming would kill this in a heartbeat. None of the games are even technically yours. You can't sell used copies anymore, and you cannot let a friend borrow the game unless they set up some sort of sharing thing. Secondly, your internet connection would greatly impact how you play. If you have great internet, then no problem. But if you have a really bad internet connection, you might not be able to stream too well, which, if they take this route, would really suck. The last issue is, with the way Sony and Microsoft operate, streaming games would be a very easy way to take that $50 a year, because streaming has to be an always online process. You are kind of purchasing a DRM machine, and with that, the device would be worthless unless you're ready to fork over that money for internet. I don't see them doing an offline mode, but they could surprise me. Again, this is not something that they've come out and said they're going to do. They have not announced this whatsoever. This is just me trying to think of where they could go and will go so that the next generation of consoles can compete with PCs as they always try to do. They did not hit their mark this generation, and it's uncommon for that to happen. Sony and Microsoft are normally ahead of the game, and I'm sure that they're going to want to do that again. Now there are flaws with that system. If they build a streaming device, they won't really have much of a reason to sell you another one after that. All of the hardware will be upgraded on their end, so once they sell you that streaming device, there's no going back, which is something that they're not used to. They try to make a new console every 5 to 8 years, and a lot of money is generated from that. There's no way they would just give that up. If they did, they would just have to rely on game sales, which is why I feel that maybe they won't go the streaming route. Another thing they could do is essentially do what they did this generation and just build gaming PCs. Except maybe this time, they won't go so weak with them. The only issue with this is if they go too powerful, the console is going to cost far too much for the average consumer to want to spend. They have to make a profit, so if they make a $700 PC, they're gonna have to sell it for a few $100 more than the actual worth of the console. And if they go too weak, they're gonna have the same issue that they had this generation. And I will say that this generation of consoles wasn't pitiful, but it was definitely the worst that I've ever seen. Now, credit where credit is due, Sony and Microsoft did a good job for the worst I've ever seen. And if this is their worst, seriously, you guys handled it well. But it cannot happen again. I see diehard fanboys complaining all the time about how their consoles were boasting about being more powerful than PCs. And then when the next generation consoles came out, they were already 5 years out of date. Again, you've done a great job. Some of the games that are on these consoles should not run the way they do, so I commend them for that. But it cannot happen again. So what I think they're going to do next time is this. Sony and Microsoft will probably build another gaming PC like they did this gen. It'll have far superior specs, so games will at least run at 1080p 60 FPS. There will be no physical copies of games. You will have to buy all your games from their app store. And there will also be a streaming system, as I mentioned before, to ease people into the idea that streaming will be their future. I think that they should introduce that slowly. It would be a good way to show people too. Oh look, I'm playing this Xbox 2 game on my next generation Xbox. This game looks great at 1080p 60 FPS. But what's really cool is if I stream this game from their servers, I can play the same game at much higher graphics, at 4K 60 FPS. Honestly, I think this is the most logical move for them. Now, how could that affect gaming? Well, at that point, everyone would pretty much be gaming on PCs, kind of like they are now, but with a little more torque. We would have the potential for more cross-platforming titles, and since our hardware would be similar, we would be playing at similar settings. Sony and Microsoft would be kind of like Alienware and HP. They're making gaming PCs, except they make their own operating system and architecture, same as how they are now. And as for the hardware in these consoles, I'd say they'd probably use a GPU similar to the 750 Ti, or if we're lucky, a 960 equivalent. I really doubt that last bit, but who knows? As for the processor, I could see them doing a quad-core at 2.9 or 3.0 GHz. I think that could potentially equate to around a $500 to $600 range, which I think is acceptable. Now, would I be interested in a console like this? Well, no. I'm not a fan of Sony or Microsoft for many reasons, and I already have a very nice gaming PC which can play games at 4K, but I think this would be the best way for them to achieve a console that is by its own hardware at least on par with mid-range gaming PCs. And with the collaboration of a streaming setup, could play games at a high-end gaming PC realm, which again is what Sony and Microsoft have strived for almost every time in the past. But this is just my take on it all. They may very well not go this route and just make another next-gen console with a bit beefier specs. Nobody can say, but regardless of it all, I'm only concerned about how it will affect the industry. As a PC gamer, them going to full-on streaming could be bad for us. I could see Sony and Microsoft, especially Microsoft, trying to get us PC gamers involved in this streaming-only setup, and I could see them also trying to get us to pay monthly or yearly for their servers, which would suck. I like being able to have the option of where I get my games. Be it DRM or not, companies that try to force you to use their store generally don't turn out well. But we would potentially lose a lot of games to this if they decide that they didn't want to make PC ports and just try to force us to stream only as well. I'm not for that, and I really like having a library that is mine and can't potentially be taken away because a company decides they want to move on. Anyway, I've ranted for too long, and the reason is because anything can happen here, and it can change a lot for better or for worse. And I'm a little worried because I know these companies, and I know where their hearts lie. When it comes to a choice between the consumer and money, they tend to fall a certain way every time.